Hey everybody, glory to Jesus Christ. My name is Father Bartimaeus. I'm here today with the Pantocrats Institute, and we're going to have another talk here, short video on a new topic. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about knowing each other. We're going to talk about what the research shows about making space in your mind for your significant other. Heads up, it shows that it increases significant relationship satisfaction. Okay, so very important topic we're going to be talking about today. Stick around and let's get right into it. So, very first thing is I'm going to ask is how well do you know your spouse or your significant other? Right, that's the big challenge. That's the big test. So we're going to be continuing to kind of reflect on certain portions of the Bringing Home Baby program out of the Gottman Institute today. And I'm going to be bringing in some other concepts from other places as well. But primarily, this is a part of the Gottman Institute's method of therapy, and and this is one of the things that they talk about, right? So this developing love maps, right? Developing love maps, and not just developing love maps, but also deepening those love maps with our significant other. So we have to ask the question of what are love maps? Okay, love maps are very simple. They're a very simple way of getting to know a person. In essence, they're a mental map of like your spouse's like likes and dislikes, their interests, their daily activities, their hobbies, their dreams. Okay, their history, right? Because like you haven't lived with this person your entire life unless like you live back in the 50s and everyone knew everyone and you grew up with them and you married your high school sweetheart and you've known them since you were 5 years old, but that's a Hallmark story. Okay, like not that doesn't happen these days. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about love maps. Excuse me, give me 1 second here. Yeah, so we're going to talk about love maps. We're going to talk about what they look like and how we can do these. Um, I want to make a quick note though that love maps don't only have to do with like you and your spouse. They can also be for your children, right? Because inside of this family system, right, you have the couple subsystem, and then you also have this subsystem of the family that is like you and your children and every single child that's a part of that family. So if you have children, you can work on trying to make love maps with your children too as well. It's a little, just a very quick little thing that you can do. Asking open-ended questions. So let's talk about what is that. What is an open-ended question? What does that look like? Okay, very simple. An open-ended question means they can't answer yes or no. Okay, so like a lot of people, they engage their children. They'll be like, "Hey, did you have a good day today?" Or they'll even engage their spouse. They'll be like, "Did you have a good day today?" No. Oh, okay. You know, the open-ended question would be like, "Oh, well, why was it a bad day?" Well, this is going to really tell if their psychological state. If they're interested, then they're going to open up and they're going to talk more, because you've already developed an emotional connection, right? A lot of times, what we're seeing is that there's this emotional disconnect between like the person or the two people, in that like we kind of feel or we kind of make this assumption that people don't change, right? So it's like, oh, well, they're the same person they were, like 15 years ago. That's not true. People go through experiences, people go through different things, and because of that, that's going to make it very difficult if that spouse or that parent to that child doesn't keep up with the changes that are going on, right? So, like, as a child's moving through school, grade school, middle school, high school, there's different experiences that they're experiencing. They could be experiencing being bullied, but they don't talk about it. They could be experiencing levels of uncomfortability, going through puberty, etc. As for your spouse, even though they're an adult, they're still changing. They're still having life experiences. They're still having, things that are going on internally inside of them every day, right? So it's important that we ask questions and we ensure that we maintain this relationship with our significant other, with our spouse, because at the end of the day, that's going to help us to maintain the emotional connection, so that when they do want to open up, let's say they don't want to open up about a certain topic, right? At some point, though, the emotional connection will be there, and they will want to open up, right? And then that's whenever what Gottman found was like you have to turn towards them. You have to open up yourself, open your ears, be active listening, and be 100% engaged with them, right? So asking open-ended questions about their life, about their dreams. What do you want to do in the next 5 years? What are your goals? What are your life dreams in the next 10 years? What do you want to do when you retire? Right? These questions are going to keep a level of engagement with your spouse. They're going to allow you to maintain like a knowledge of who your spouse is. Right? Listen whenever they tell you little things. If your husband says, "I want to buy a boat," okay, that would be fair to be like, why do you want to buy a boat? But also let's check our tone. Let's check the way that we ask those questions. Just because you think someone is crazy doesn't mean that you need to respond to them in a way that makes them feel like you think that they're crazy, right? So the way that we express ourselves, the way that we speak to our significant other and to our children, those things are going to be extremely, incredibly important, because they're going to lay out a foundation for the way that the person is going to respond, right? If you come off as critical or accusatory or any of these things, you're going to get defensiveness and stonewalling, right? It just sounds like you're blaming them. So whenever you do these things, you're actually not building that emotional connection. You're disintegrating that emotional connection. So even if we disagree with something that our spouse might have their mind on, we still have to realize that, okay, I can't just shut him down. I can't just shut her down, right? I've got to stop. I've got to listen, and I've got to be engaging. Now, when it comes time, you also need to express yourself and be like, I don't think that's the best idea, right? But it's also important to recognize that the couple subsystem is an equal subsystem. The goal, especially when moving from marriage to parenthood, is to moving from this me perspective to the we perspective. And that happens a lot of times. A lot of times what happens is couples, when they have their first children, they can't seem to make that switch over, right? It's not about me as an individual, it's about we as a family, right? We as a group, right? And so it's very important that we check ourselves at the door and we ensure that we're not making this mistake, right? Because the research has shown that, again, those couples that are able to make that transition from me to we, they have higher levels of relationship satisfaction, right? So these are all extremely, incredibly important things that we need to keep in mind, that we need to be doing. So also, when we place ourselves outside of our own cares and asking open-ended questions and getting to really know your spouse or your children, you also automatically are moving out of that me and moving more into the we phase of thinking, right? We need to change our thoughts, and it will change our life, the way that we do things, the way that we live things, right? And so it's very important that we do these things, that we build these love maps, we build these emotional connections, because that's going to give us higher relationship satisfaction. That's what the research shows. So with that being said, that's where I'm going to end it at today. I want to leave you with a little bit of homework, though, because I think it's very, very important that I leave you with just a little bit of homework, So there's a few things I want you to do. So first off, I want you to sit down with your spouse, your children, right? And I want you to just sit down and have a conversation. Get involved into what their interests are. Hey, honey, what things are you interested in today? These days. Ask them the question, right? Get them involved, right? How have you worked with making shared meetings and shared cultural rituals with your significant other over the period of the past week, right? use those as a means of having more open-ended questions. Hey, I thought about this. How do you think we can incorporate this, right? Building that shared journey, building that shared experience of each other, right? So very incredibly important inside of our relationships. And so this is what I'm going to challenge you to do for this week. I want you to work on that. I want you to set aside a time, right? Set aside a time, maybe 10 or 15 minutes at the end of each day, just to sit down and talk about these things. Now, if you go over, that's fine. Don't worry about that, right? But what I want you to do is I want you to just take 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the day, and I just want you to talk about each other, talk about your life, right, with your significant other. Talk about how you can maybe build more of those shared rituals, of course, but also just getting to know one another, right? You know, I know we haven't been on a date night in a while. If you could go on a date night, right? Where would you go? What would you do? You know what I mean? Like, get the feeling where they're coming at and where they're coming from, and kind of what their likes and dislikes would be at the moment. So, with that being said, that's going to be the end of my lecture for today. But listen, um, pray, pray together, continue to pray together with your spouse, continue to reflect upon shared relationship, right? That shared memory, shared life that you're creating, right? But also, I want you to also focus on something else. I also want you to start asking open-ended questions and learning more about your spouse, and never stop learning. Okay, a person is not just like a one book, and then you've read it once and you're done. No, a person, the one who has the dignity of God, right? The dignity of the image and likeness of God. They have within them the icon of Christ. That icon, when you first met it, probably was very scarred, right? With sin and everything else. But especially if you're married, marriage is supposed to help you heal that image, to become more and more in the image of the Father, right? We participate in this in so many different ways as parents, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's so very important that you realize that, like, this person that you're walking this life with, they're going to change. They're going to have new interests. They're going to have new likes. That's typical. No one stays the same for 40 years. Okay, so you know, always remember that change is always happening, and always try to stay on top of your spouse and understanding who they are and how they're seeing the world and what their perception of the world is. And with that, I hope that you guys are doing great. I hope that last week was great. And please just leave comments down below, like and subscribe to the page. And thank you so much for following me this week. And till next week, may God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And I'll see you in another week. May God bless you. Goodbye.